ask you where does your research with how men grieve differently and utilize therapy differently, how does that fit within the men's rights movement?
Well, actually, it was what got me started with things. When I worked with men, and the therapist to begin with had said men don't grieve, and the men who would tell me no one wants to hear what I'm talking about, I started realizing, men's pain is taboo. That people don't want to touch it. They don't want to smell it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to do anything about it. They just don't want to, and they're encouraged not to. Men are supposed to be tough and strong. I can't tell you the number of men I worked with whose children died, and they'd come back and tell me, everybody comes home and they come up to my wife and they say, "How you doing? Can I do anything for you? What are you feeling?" And they come up to me and they say, "How's your wife holding up?" Yeah. It's as if their pain doesn't exist. It's just not there. And the men are very conscious of this. The men are conscious that our society doesn't want to hear their pain. And no one wants to hear it. And so the men aren't dumb enough to go out and emote publicly, because their pain is taboo. Very different from a woman's pain. A woman's pain is a call to action. Let's do a story. You walk into your favorite restaurant and you're being seated and you look over in the corner table and you see a woman at the table crying. She's got her head, tears are coming down her face. What's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Well, maybe she was broken up with, she's sad.
She's sad, she's broken up, and poor thing, right? Mm-hmm. I give this same thing to the workshops I give with therapists, and they all say the same thing. Poor dear, she's upset, she needs support, right? I say, okay, good. Erase that image, go back again. Now, you come into the same restaurant, you're being seated, but in the corner table is a man. He's crying. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
It could be different for many people, but I think most people would maybe say, "Oh, he's a sissy, maybe he's gay."
Okay. The therapists almost always would say, "There's something wrong with him. Avoid him. Steer clear. He's probably drunk." So this kind of tells us and these were therapists. I mean, these were people who know interactions. They know the ins and outs of psychological connection, and they're saying there's something wrong with this guy. And frankly, the first time I did this for myself, I felt the same thing. I felt like, ooh, I don't deal with that. And I realized then, even I'm biased. I've got a bias against men in pain. So if I've got it, just think what other people have, And we all have it. It's like it's a taboo that no one wants to touch. And it's all threaded into the disposability piece. Because if men are disposable, then they shouldn't have pain. A plastic fork. Do you feel bad about a plastic fork? No, you just toss it out. The people have pet snakes. You ever know anybody who has a pet snake? These big boa constrictors? Mm-hmm. What do they feed them?
Rats or mice?
Little teeny mice, little pinkies. And do people get attached to their snakes? Oh, yes. Oh, I love my snake. Boa, my snake, is my life. But do they get attached to the little mice they feed them? No, they're disposable. What would happen if the little mouse said, "Hey, wait a minute. I don't want to be fed to the snake. Not today. Not today." What would people say to that? They'd say, "You whiner. Get back in line. You're nothing but food." And in some ways, that's what it's like for men today. Men are the white mice. Anyway, your question was, how did it get me into the MRA stuff? And the answer is that when I started seeing how taboo men's pain was, and that men needed compassion but weren't getting it, it took me into other areas where I started to see the same thing. And this is a thread that goes through many of the issues that you'll see in men's issues today, and that is that men are lacking in compassion, just like they were with the grief stuff. And they're lacking in choice. Those two things, choice and compassion.
Choice. What in choice?
Oh, gosh. When you think about women, her body, her choice, right? But think about men. His body, his choice, not so much. I've worked with men before in therapy who've come in because their wife wants to abort the child and they don't. What do you tell him? What do you say to him? Oh, it's heartbreaking. He's got no say in the entire matter. Now, it's a tough one, and it's a very difficult and touchy issue, but he should have some say in there someplace. There should be some way that things can get worked out. Who knows what? But men don't have choice. The choice they have is to work full-time, or work full-time. You know? Yeah.
So with men in grieving and men in therapy, do you think, is it issues of the expectation of masculinity put on men is why they feel like they can't share their feelings openly or cry in a restaurant and not be judged for that? Like, is it
Yes.
a masculinity issue?
That is certainly a part of it. It's part of the socialization, but there's a lot of other issues too. In fact, I came up with 4 things that I realized were keeping people from seeing men's pain. Men's pain is invisible because of these 4 things. The first we've talked about already, the taboo. A man's pain is taboo, and because it's taboo, people don't see it. You know, they're just going to do like this. And they don't even know it. I mean, most people don't even have a concept that they are not able to see it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that men are saddled with a very rigid sex role of provide and protect. You know, men are expected to provide and protect. And most of them go along with that. You know, that's okay. But they don't have much leeway from that. And when you don't have much leeway from the provide and protect role, what does it keep you from doing? You're encouraged to be independent, right, and successful. But are you encouraged to be dependent? No. Dependency foils the whole provide and protect role, right? And what is grief? What are emotions? They are showing dependency. You know, that's a dependent mode. So we're expecting men to come into therapy, and they've been trained now for years to provide and protect, to take care of things. And what happens? We expect them to say, oh, well, now you're supposed to be vulnerable and talk about your feelings. Not so much. Not so much, because he is locked into this role. And there's this taboo is one thing. The provide and protect role is another. And, oh gosh. Oh, the dominance hierarchy. You know, we're finding now that men live in a dominance hierarchy. And, you know, the bighorn sheep, you know what they do? They ram each other's heads. They butt each other's heads in order to see who's going to be top of the hierarchy, correct? Mm-hmm. And we now are thinking that men have the same kind of hierarchical stuff going on. But instead of butting heads, men strive for status. We strive for status. And this is a little bit confusing because, you know, you think of striving for status as being seeking power. And yes, that's a part of it. But striving for status can also be the opposite. You know, striving for status for some men could be if a man is a pacifist. His striving for power could, in fact, be, I'll be the best pacifist I can be. Or I'll put on the best conference for pacifism that I possibly can. So within each niche, men will tend to strive for power. And you can see that every place. You know, you can see it every place you look. You know, we're number one. And men's sense of needing to be on top and not wanting to be below. Because in the hierarchy, you want to put yourself up as close to the top as you can. And you do not want to be seen near the bottom. Well, guess what puts you near the bottom? Feelings and dependency. I mean, that'll drop you like a rock. You know, so men don't want to have that stuff come up to the surface because it makes them appear dependent and appears though they're not good enough. They're not at the top of their game. And men always want to stay at the top. And, you know, the hierarchy we're finding for men is in so many different spheres. But apparently women also have one hierarchy. Do you know what it is?
Looks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Women will compete and try and stay in a hierarchy based on appearance. And gosh, look at the what do you call it, the makeup industry, you know, and the all the things to keep appearance up. That's how women struggle with each other. And, some women won't go out of the house without having their makeup on, right? Why? Because they don't want to appear less than attractive, correct? So if you told that woman that, she would understand that completely. But would she understand the man who didn't want to seem dependent when he's in therapy? Because he's doing the same thing. Do you see how it works? Mm-hmm. His not wanting to appear dependent is like not wanting to go out without his makeup. It's just we can't understand it when men do it, but we seem to understand it when women do.